Hi everyone, I'm Fernando Hernandez. I'm host of RevOps Around the World podcast, brought to you by Compartilhando Insights. And I'd like to start by thanking everyone who's watching this inaugural episode. The idea of this podcast is really simple, to bring together RevOps professionals from different parts of the world to share perspectives, experiences, and lessons learned. Before we begin, I would like to welcome our guests and say how great I am to have all of them here today. So thank you, Stephen, for joining us.
Hey, Fernando, super excited to be here.
Thank you, Peter, for being here as well.
Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
And thank you, Francisco, for being part of this episode.
Thank you, Fernando, and thank you, Stefan and Peter. I think it will be a great conversation.
Now, quickly about the format, each guest will have up to 20 minutes to present their topic and share their insights. After that, we have 10 minutes for questions and discussion from other guests, from myself, and from those who watch episode at home. So, if you have any question about any presentation or about RevOps in general, please just share in the comments. So before each presentation, I'll briefly introduce the guests and their background. So with that being said, let's get started. So introduce our first guest, Stephen Diorio. Stephen is an established authority in go-to-market strategy, commercial transformation, and revenue operation. Over the last 35 years, Mr. Diorio has helped over 100 leading brands, including American Express, BB&T, Intuit, Janus Henderson, Morgan Stanley, SunTrust Bank, and US Bank to transform the commercial strategy, system, and operation to accelerate growth and become more data-driven, digital, and accountable. He's widely published, having authored over 30 research papers and books that connect growth investments to firm value. Include this book here, Revenue Operation, A New Way to Align Size and Marketing. I already read it and it's just amazing. Uh, I can't recommend this enough. And Beyond E, 12 Ways Technology will Transform Sales and Marketing Strategy. A great book as well. So now it's your show, Stephen. Do your magic.
Oh, I'm on. Okay, fantastic. I'm going to share if that's okay, and let's see if I do it right. Share screen, entire screen. Just give me a second. Am I live? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So I've been around the block. I've spent 30 years advising companies, and yes, I wrote this book, Revenue Operations. Everything I cover in my talk is in the book, and I will provide links to the appropriate chapters. And certainly, if you're interested in the book, reach out to Fernando or myself, and we'll give it to you. So let's start with the obvious question: why does revenue operations matter? And it matters. Why did it exist? It's one of the fastest growing jobs in the world. Well, the forces of gravity here, and we're going to talk a lot about this today. One, business model transformation. Organizations are becoming SaaS businesses. They're adding what we call 4D channels: digital, data driven, distributed, diverse digital channels. Customers are changing their behavior, bigger buyer groups, more online buying. 90% of buying happens online. There's a huge technology ecosystem that has emerged um, to support selling. The average organization has between 20 and 40 pieces of software to support their growth model. And of course, this is all being amplified by a revolution in analytics and AI. But let me make this real. I've been around the block since the 1980s working on go to market. And if you do a time series analysis, the traditional mix of advertising, human salespeople, promotion and sponsorship, the green and the orange, it wasn't that hard to sell. Put ads on TVs, give discounts, and it'll work. There was very, very little technology, maybe a database, maybe a cash register, and very digital channels didn't even exist. Maybe the call center was the big innovation. In the mid 90s, the internet was invented. 2000, sales enablement was invented. Digital channels, e-commerce, AI, sales enablement. So these red and blue channels emerged to the point where today Growing a business is a data-driven, digital team sport where most of what you spend, the blue and the red, data, digital channels, or knowledge, assets. And that's something that Peter's going to talk about. So if you look at it over a 50-year span, it kind of makes sense. We were, riding horses and buggies in 1980, and now we're driving AI-enabled machines in 2025. So what is revenue operations? Well, it's a system. Everything complex in the world has a system. For example, the human body has a system. A computer has a system. Anything with moving parts that need to be connected and work together towards a common purpose, even the heating, ventilating, and air conditioning in your building. The only thing that doesn't have a system is growth. Marketing, sales, customer care, operations, they never worked together until now. I grew up in the factory. I'm an engineer, so I want the world to work like that. So I want you to think about revenue operations as a system that gets all the people, processes, technology, and data, which Peter's going to talk about, aligned around this bow tie, or what we call this revenue cycle. And so that's what the system is. So let's look at this. Why does this matter? It makes you a lot of money. It's a system that drives profitable, reliable, and scalable growth. And all this chart says is the more you use RevOps to generate reliable and scalable growth, the more your firm is worth. And so there's a business reason RevOps exists. So let's look at this revenue cycle. It's commonly called a bow tie. It's essentially a sales funnel on the left, but as Peter's going to talk about, there's an expansion funnel on the right. In fact, most businesses can grow by expanding their relationships through loyalty, consumption, and cross-sell when they focus incredibly on demand generation. And Peter's going to talk about that. And what Francisco is going to talk about is the scientific method. The bow tie is nice, but the beauty of RevOps and where RevOps come in is that the bottom is closing the loop. All you're really doing is describing the problem of the performance at the top. But what do you do about it at the bottom? So Francisco is going to talk about the scientific method and hypothesis-driven thinking. Everything that happens at the top in the bow tie is a guess. And you get data at the end of that, and you measure performance. Did we win? Did we lose? What are we going to adjust? How will we improve? How will we reallocate resources? What are we going to do differently? And so what a lot of people ignore, but what's really exciting about revenue operations is this closed loop, continuous improvement process that has made the factories more productive, made chip production more productive, made supply chains more productive. And I think, Francisco is going to talk about how we can use that to make our go-to-market more productive. And so there's a lot of different things that happen here, from pricing to distribution to relationship management to planning, customer experience design, Salesforce design, and value prop. The other thing is it's team sport. RevOps is a team sport. It's a data-driven, digital, tech-enabled team sport. Everybody is involved. There are 7 major functions, from product to marketing to sales and customer success to finance, IT, and operations. So your ability to talk to these people, convince them to work together, and create it in their self-interest to achieve value is a key skill, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. One thing you should be thinking about RevOps is, how do I communicate to all these people? And we've created little Pokemon cards or playing cards that can actually help you do that. So I'll put those in the bottom of this thing. The other thing is RevOps does a lot of work. Operations has exploded. Revenue operations really isn't one job. Probably some of these people on the call are in sales operations. Others might be in CRM administration, customer success, product marketing, marketing operations. If I talk to an ops person, they may have one of 12 titles. A lot of times in smaller organizations, one human being will be doing 5 or 8 of these jobs. So we got to think about role clarity, but you're all over making the system work. And the guys, I think, who are having the most fun are Fernando's guys at the bottom, who are using the scientific method to look at what happened and actually do something to make it better. And so these are all outlined. It's in the book. I'm going to have links on all these things. So one of the problems is this is really, really complex. And it's so complex that the average executive who grew up in the 80s, 90s, 2000s doesn't even understand all these moving parts. So that's creating blind spots, leaks, and alignment. So product marketing, product management, marketing, and sales, they're taught or trained, but the RevOps person is turning all these dials and trying to hold this whole thing together. You have a whole different perspective. And so things like revenue leakage, allocation of selling effort, resource allocation, those are almost invisible to people. In fact, RevOps people need to be pulling on 40 different oars. And I can almost guarantee you the person driving the ship, he or she, doesn't even know if all those oars are pointed in the right direction or even doing the right thing. And so one of the reasons that people have a hard time managing a modern revenue engine is because they don't understand these oars. And in fact, there are 40 oars. The average executive I work with understands a few of them. Yes, I know I'm going to beat up on my sales. I'm going to look at my revenue forecast. I'm going to look at seller conversion rates. But there are so many other oars, including, pricing discipline, building brand preference, simplifying the seller workflow. I'm going to distribute all 40 of these oars. But my big point is, if you don't even understand the oars in the boat, how can you make sure the boat is performing? And so that's the big blind spot. And this is what RevOps people master. They're the ones who understand the oars. They talk to all the oarsmen and women, and it's very powerful. The other thing holding people back is they don't even know what to manage. Selling know-how, product innovations. They can't measure these things. The knowledge that Peter is going to talk about customers, about how to sell, is one of the most valuable assets in the company, yet nobody in finance even measures it. We keep track of our money, we keep track of our trucks, but we don't keep track of our customer know-how, much less track technology, and we measure these things. So we don't even have math, the math of growth, in order to understand these things. We teach a class in the math of growth. They don't teach it in business school. Most executives don't understand it. RevOps people do. I'll give you a class on the math of growth and the growth equation. And if you can master this math, you can start to get your organization focused on what actually makes a difference. So math is a big problem, and that's something to think about. And we don't even measure properly. Everybody is looking at revenue metrics, productivity, time savings, and win rate. And certainly those are good things. But in an AI world, we're looking at assets, the customer experience, the speed of response, the knowledge of our customers, and how we use artificial intelligence to monetize that knowledge in customer interactions. So we call this our stairway to heaven or stairway to nirvana. And one of the problems is people are so focused on managing conversion rates, cost to sell, productivity, and marginal cost improvements. They're not even looking at the return on investments and the return on data assets, channel assets, and knowledge assets with AI, which are really going to multiply growth. So this math of growth and your ability to take this stairway up to a business case that the board will understand is critically important. At the end of the day, the revenue engine has over 40 gears. And the beauty of RevOps is they are the red gear in the middle that makes all of these gears turn. And the fact that you need to understand that one gear connects to the other is a really good case. We have a video and a class on this, but these gears you should understand. They do not teach these gears in school. And anybody who owns a gear probably doesn't even know the gears that they lock with around. So just situational awareness is a huge issue. So what can you do to build skills to elevate your career, impact, and yes, your salary? Well, one, the math of growth. Finance, value management is a huge untapped skill. People, the ability to talk to those 7 people in product, marketing, sales, finance, and IT, and have them understand their role on the team, the soccer team. Are you a striker? Are you a goalie? Are you a back or a midfielder? It's critically important. Cross-functional processes. People don't look and own the processes in the business, the lead to cash flow, the product distribution process, the enablement process. There are core process, the planning process. Thinking about processes is a skill. Yes, you've got to understand the tech stack. Yes, you've got to understand how to use data, and obviously Peter and Francisco are going to talk about those things. But also change management. Most of the people that you've got to work with don't want to change. So getting them to change, convincing them to change, creating common purpose, and turning the dials and making those adjustments that Francisco is going to talk about, changing sales coverage, changing customer treatment, changing channel mixes. All of those adjustments and the focus of sales can make a huge difference. So again, I'll give you a little video, but these are the things. And surprisingly, finance, talking to people, change management, and process management are really big parts of the equation. So I'm going to stop now because I think I've gone over time, but I'm going to provide Fernando links to all these resources. And I really think what Peter and Francisco are going to say is incredibly relevant to being successful in the job.
RevOps comes to. Could you hear me before?
No.
No. Okay. Sorry. So departments, verticals was created to manage better. But with that, we created some gaps in the customer journey because each vertical, each department was only looking for its own department and vertical. With that, RevOps comes to create efficiency in that customer journey that was separated. So my question for you is did you find any better organizational hierarchy format to deal with this efficiency problem throughout the customer journey? If for instance, is one person looking for revenue from CX to sales to marketing to customer success or any other format?
Was that for me or for Peter?
For you, Stephen.
Oh, okay.
But anyone, but
I'll
Francisco and
start, but I
Peter
know
can join in.
I know Peter has something to say. So in chapter 4 of my book, there are 3 models that people do. One is the czar or the dictator or the king. They put one person in charge of everything. That is an impossible job. It's probably too thin, and like an empire, is hard to control. It works. You'll see a chief customer officer, chief revenue officer. It works. The other is a coalition, like a good soccer team, my favorite sport. The coach can't run plays or even go on the field, but they find a way to work together, allocate resources and effort to score a goal in a situational. And then the last is the RevOps superstar. An ambitious RevOps person has their hands on the data and the oars, and if they know finance, like I said, they get in the boardroom really quick because they have the data that Peter's going to talk about, and they can explain what it means to the business and what oars to pull, which is what Francisco is going to talk about. And those are the people that are more effective. All 3 work, but I think Peter's going to talk about the pros and cons of organizational redesign in terms of RevOps. But teamwork, math of growth, cooperation, and connecting data to value and looking at those oars, that's what really works. It's like a good soccer team. The coalitions work better than almost anything.
Someone want to join in this conversation?
So I do think that so one of the most challenging things I think in practice is like, I think you mentioned it, Stephen, is change management, right? And I mean, independent of where you want to go, it's always like the question how you're going to get there, right? And changing processes and changing how people work, and also how these departments and teams work together. That's what I've seen is one of the biggest challenges. And I totally agree with Stephen that, I mean, I think that there are probably more efficient ways to work together. I think a good RevOps person probably is going to try and find kind of coalitions within the different departments or the different teams, trying to close these feedback loops that Stephen was also talking about. And this is how you're still able to improve, right? And how you make wins, and these wins give you momentum to change the overall process. I think so. That's what I've seen to work. But I think change is one of the biggest obstacles to getting to a better kind of organization or structure within the organization.
Thank you for contribution, Peter. So now I have to introduce Peter to his presentation. So Peter Eigenschink is an independent marketing decision intelligence consultant and researcher based in Vienna, Austria. He holds a PhD in quantitative marketing from Vienna University of Economics and Business, where he currently studies data-driven decision making in RevOps and GTM. His practical background spans 10 years plus of consulting in business process automation, predictive modeling, and optimization, with projects ranging from revenue simulation and price optimization to lead management and demanding forecasts. So, Peter, the stage is all yours.
All right, thanks for the introduction, Fernando. Let me maybe also start by sharing my screen. Can you see anything?
Yes, now we can.
All right, perfect. So I think Stephen's presentation was I think mine will pretty well complement what he's been talking about. So I'm focusing more like on the data angle. So one of the aspirations of RevOps is to be like data driven, and so I was interested from my perspective on where are we actually on data driven decisions in RevOps. And what I find is that there are many obstacles to data-driven decisions in RevOps. But what I also find, and this is also what Stephen was hinting towards, is that often there is a strong focus on new customer acquisition, while there is a lot of information and also GTM intelligence hidden in the post-sales data. And I think this is actually a very underused asset. And I'm going to tell you why I believe this is the case. And then I would like to open the discussion with Francisco and Stephen and Fernando to talk about what you're thinking about this post-sales data, how it's currently actually used, and if you also think that it's actually an underused asset for GTM. So going back to Stephen's point, I think he's mentioned this pretty well. So RevOps is actually also under increasing pressure due to this growing complexity in GTM that Stephen has mentioned. So you have more channels, you have more tools, you have more data, you have more teams that are involved. You have these 3 departments: marketing, sales, customer success, but also like other teams like finance or product are involved in GTM decisions and GTM strategy. You have these 40 levers of growth support that Stephen has been talking about. And this makes the whole GTM strategy far more complex than it has been in the past. And at the same time, in recent years, efficiency pressure is also rising. So lifetime value and customer acquisition costs are under more scrutiny from the board, and more importantly, this ratio between lifetime value and customer acquisition costs is under scrutiny. CAC payback periods are rising and NRR is declining. So NRR meaning like that customers are churning or not expanding, which is also like one of the levers of growth, how you could grow your company by expanding your existing accounts. And RevOps is actually mandated to bridge these two challenges, right? So the idea of RevOps is that RevOps is able to align the GTM teams around data, basically, and using data-driven decisions to drive predictable and efficient growth. So this is the mandate of RevOps, and Stephen has perfectly described what a good RevOps team, what the role of a good RevOps team is, what the responsibilities are, and what the goal is for them to achieve. So my question in the end was more like, where are we actually today? How far away are we from being actually able to have data-driven decisions? So I started this kind of small research project on data-driven decisions in RevOps, mainly addressing these questions. So where do we actually stand today? How far are we off from these aspirations to be mostly data-driven and having this aligning function? So I've been looking at this from different angles, like how is data incorporated in strategic and tactical decisions compared to intuition-based decisions? Where do data-driven efforts usually focus? What are inhibitors and facilitators of data-driven decisions? And how is the scope of the impact? And what I did is it's mostly an empirical assessment. I conducted more than 40 interviews with RevOps and GTM professionals across 4 continents to get a better understanding of where we are right now. And I'm not going to discuss this kind of research broadly, but I'm going to focus on a specific aspect of that, namely on the aspect of how is existing customer data or post-sales data currently used, and where does the focus actually lie in current RevOps. So if we come back to the bow tie, Stephen has introduced it. So of course we see there's also what Stephen showed us. RevOps is involved in a lot of revenue decisions. There's a lot of stuff going on that at least touches RevOps responsibilities or is fully in control from the RevOps team. And this involves things like ICP definitions or targeting decisions. This involves things like data enrichment, enriching your data with third-party signals, or enriching data with firmographics or demographics or technographics. This can involve like territory design for your sales representatives, capacity planning, or resource allocation. This can be things like deal prioritization or account prioritization. Can be a lot of things, and a lot of the stuff is actually one of the so a lot of effort actually goes into let's say the data plumbing work. So one of the biggest issues that many participants have been raising was the data quality is bad. So a lot of RevOps efforts actually still go into improving the data quality. This can be through enrichment or automatic activity capture or automatic CRM field populations. There are a lot of different approaches to that. Another category would be making your reps more efficient. This could be like helping with call briefs to give them summaries of previous calls, or QBR briefs for in the retention setting, or things like automating outbound or automating research for SDRs. This is still kind of isolated, as I'd say, so still not like within these more feedback loops that Stephen has been talking about. Then there come these things that are more covering these feedback loops. So for example, here in the center, you see the sales and CS handoff, which is often a big problem So this is also where RevOps comes in to handle these handoffs more efficiently, or handoffs of leads between marketing and sales. And then there are like the big feedback loops where RevOps really addresses systemic issues or designs processes in different ways. So this can be things like, for example, lead scoring or lead routing, where this determines the priority of deals that sales representatives are working on based on, for example, past conversions and win rates. So like a data-based feedback loop of how new leads are rated that come into the pipeline. Or, for example, on the customer retention and expansion side, could be things like health scoring or churn risk assessment or things like that. But the thing that, so these topics that came up during my conversations, and these were things that RevOps people were actually working on in these different kinds of categories. But the thing that in general struck me about this is that if you look at these graphicals, for example, this is very left heavy. So there are a lot of tasks as a RevOps is involved in the acquisition phase and in acquisition of new customers, and less so in the customer retention and expansion part of the life cycle. And this reflects also where like the analytical effort usually goes. It's predominantly in customer acquisition. So this is like, as mentioned before, things like territory design, capacity planning, resource allocation, lead routing, or lead scoring. And this actually translates into reducing the customer acquisition costs. So if I can make my sales reps or my marketing more efficient, in the end, I can reduce the customer acquisition costs. But it often stops like after the acquisition. And of course, RevOps professionals are also focusing on customer retention and expansion topics, but it's kind of rare that these really bridge the gap between acquisition and post sales. And overall, it's also one observation is that many improvements actually stay local within customer acquisition, but also locally within customer retention and expansion. So some things are I mentioned a lot of examples. So like these car briefs, it's very local. So it really helps sales reps saving time. But it's a very local improvement. As mentioned before, lead scoring or routing is a bit broader. But if I go from like understanding what drives conversions and wins, and using that information and going back to my SAP refinement and targeting, that would kind of close the whole acquisition loop. But if I would go further, I would even use like the post-sales data to improve my SAP and my targeting decisions, right? So in that sense, a lot of these things stay rather local, and this was kind of striking to me that most analytical efforts were going into acquisition of new customers. And I was asking myself why that might be the case. So I think one thing is, of course, I think it follows the strategic priorities, right? So usually, I think customer acquisition has a higher priority than customer retention, and we know that earlier stage companies usually focus more on acquisition than on retention. Of course, because they don't have any customers, they can't focus on customer retention. And usually, customer retention and expansion comes rather later in a company's growth stage. Then a second factor would be that this, I think it pretty much reflects budget allocations. So I think like for VC-backed companies, I think 47% of ARR usually go into marketing and sales. which also highlights already that marketing and sales or customer acquisition has a much higher priority than managing the customer base. Then there's a third factor that I've been observing also during these conversations. So I think that there is also there is a tendency to pull the familiar levers. So on the right you see this figure. So two of the biggest obstacles to data-driven decisions were bad data quality, and the first and the second one is change management resistance, and both are kind of reinforcing each other. So if I have bad data quality, I have an ambiguous direction, and then change is also harder to kind of facilitate. And if there is no change, there is bad data governance, which in turn results in bad data quality. And I think this kind of cycle usually is something that leads to more intuition-based decisions, which, as a side note, also reduce the urgency for better data and processes. But most importantly, I think these intuition-based decisions usually then tend towards the familiar levers, and the familiar levers are often customer acquisition, as mentioned before in these two other points. Since historically, also customer acquisition has a higher strategic priority and also a higher budget priority. And what I wanted to raise is that post-sales data actually carries very important GTM information, which is usually due to these factors I discussed before, which is usually, I think, underappreciated. So the first thing is that in post-sales data, you have more relevant first-party data sources. So in the pre-sales phase, you would usually have your kind of demographic, firmographic, or technographic data. You have, of course, the interactions with your sales reps, but the most telling signals are often behavioral data. Behavioral data in the pre-sales phase is often like content engagement or email engagement or social media engagement or things like that, funding rounds or recent hirings. And often these variables are not very predictive of what's actually happening, especially if we look at the lifetime value. But if you go to the post-sales data, we can directly observe our customers that have already chosen to use our product. So we have first-party product usage data. We have actual customer success interactions, so from onboarding or from customer support tickets or from past QBRs. We have actual churn data. We have actual expansion data. We have actual ARR data, or if it's like a consumption-based business, we have actual spend data that we can look at and basically use to inform our initial targeting and ICP decisions, actually. And this is also the reason why this kind of data is usually more reliable, because it's behavioral data from customers that are actually using the product. It's not something from its first party, and it's not third party data, and it's hard to kind of fake from the customer side. So they want to use the product, right? So they have an incentive to do whatever they need to do, and we have a chance to observe what they are actually doing, how they are getting their value, when they are expanding, when they're returning, and things like that. And this carries a lot of information. And as a third aspect, in the post-sales data, we have actual lifetime value data, right? So this is very important to close to fully close the loop. So kind of stopping at the conversion or at the win, we can learn which customers or which prospects to target to win them over or close the deal. But it doesn't tell us a lot about the revenue we're going to generate from these customers. So this is also information that we can get from post-sales data. This is why I think post-sales data actually carries a lot of information, and why I think it's often pretty much underused in many GTM decisions. And there is one very interesting example that I came across during these conversations that I had, which is a company actually started implementing measures to improve their customer base management, and they were able to actually use that information to close the loop with the initial ICP definition and targeting. And what they did, so again, here is like the bow tie, now a bit skewed to save some space. But if you start here, like in the center with the existing customers, so they were using like product usage data, they were using past customer success interactions, ARR and MRR data, and also some third-party signals like hirings, if some important stakeholders were like changing positions or coming in or leaving the company, that would be very valuable information for them. And based on that information they had, they developed a scoring model based on the use case the customer was using the product for, the complexity of the use case, the volume, expansion propensity, and churn risk. They would predict based on the information they had. Based on these scores, they were able to segment their customers, basically in kind of 3 or 4 segments. So they had customers that were at risk of churning, which they would then try to make them stay. So they usually schedule QBRs with them. Also, I think depending on how big the customer would actually be, they would have another segment of expanding customers, so which they would try to facilitate that expansion, so trigger an expansion play, or to maybe observing them further and at the right time triggering or scheduling a call with them to see whether there are cross-sell or upsell opportunities. And I think one of the most interesting segments is also like the low-fit customers. So they wouldn't try to reduce the churn for like every customer or every customer segment, but they would try to learn which customers are actually a good fit and which are a bad fit. And for the bad fit customers, they would deprioritize them and support like a controlled churn and actively offboard them, which turned out very, very well for them overall. So in the end, with this kind of segmentation model, they were actually able to increase the lifetime value, of course, by reducing churn and increasing expansion directly. But at the same time, they were also able to feed this segmentation back into the customer acquisition pipeline to improve their ICP and their targeting activities, which at the same time would also, in the long run, increase the lifetime values of the customers they would actually close, and also would reduce the customer acquisition costs, because more of the fitting customers would actually go into the pipeline. And this is one example. I think there was also one or two others that had similar use cases, which I found very interesting. And this is also what leads me to my takeaway that post-sales data is often very underused in GTM decisions. Post-sales data is directly tied to lifetime value and revenue, and I think that this is one of the most interesting aspects about it, and why it's so important and why there is so much information in it. It allows us to actually close the feedback loop end to end into the GTM strategy. So not only like in smaller or local feedback loops within the acquisition or within the customer acquisition departments or teams. And I think in CS, it's also usually, I think it's a good wedge to start. So as you've seen in this example, there are also the direct improvements with better lifetime values before even feeding this information back into the GTM strategy. So this is the finding that I'd like to cover. And with that, I would love to get your opinions, Stephen and Francisco and Fernando, on that. How do you see it? Do you think post-sales data is actually underused in RevOps today, or do you have examples where it's actually leveraged wisely to inform the GTM strategy?
I feel like you're twin sons of a different mother, except you got all the hair. I think you're 100%. First of all, your title is correct. It is an underutilized asset. You said that precisely. Second, your representative of the bow tie was powerful, but it talks to the flaws of people who only use the bow tie to communicate this, like winning by design. And you came back 10 times, including your example, to show that the feedback loop and the closed loop feedback and the hypothesis driven decision making that Francisco is going to talk about. Second, so that closed loop is essential to do what you're saying. Second, I think you're right. There is organizational bias, legacy budgets, history, lack of vocabulary that is really holding this back. Budgets and resources are historically put at the front. However, when I looked at the 40 or so things you put there, at least 10 of them are universal. Signals, lead scoring, resource allocation, ICP definition, activity and behavioral tracking. Historically, they're front of the funnel, but there is no reason you can't track usage of your products, allocate resources. I'll do an ad budget. 95% of the ad budget's on acquisition, 5% for ABM and recontacting. I'm like, why? Why isn't it 95% in expansion? So I think so many of those things apply to both acquisition and expansion. And people don't realize I can allocate resources and teams to accounts. So I think that's another observation. I know you meant that as well. But yes, intent signals are historically viewed as an acquisition thing. But you can mine if you have users, people using too much, people power users, lack of adoption. Those are all signals that help me grow lifetime value. So I couldn't agree more. And the last thing was the commercialization of revenue operations, which was your last slide, is one of the most popular and powerful projects we see people doing. And all that is everything you presented. And so commercializing customer success is a great, great place to start. I couldn't agree more. So sorry.
Perfect, Stephen. And I couldn't agree more because, like, when you talk to other people, sometimes they have some difficulty to understand that past can, yes, previews the future and see like, okay, I'm going to see base data to understand how can I find like the best customers here. And one really nice thing that I like when we are talking about like people who already are our clients is that we can have more information about them easier than before they are our clients. So you can have like more contact, you can call them, you can email them, and you can use like all your team to do this operation. And okay, I'm going to have more data, and now I'm going to transform this into a good strategy to find best clients now.
Yeah.
I can't. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I absolutely agree on that. I think it's also easier to get more information. It's most important to get more reliable information, I think, because I think if we look at the at the start of the bow tie, if we take the bow tie for that, information is often very unreliable. I mean, if somebody opened like a white paper, downloaded a resource or whatever, what does it actually tell us? And also during the sales calls, we often get very unstructured data. It's also very hard to judge what is really leading to a conversion in the end. And I think, as you said, I absolutely agree on that. You get much better data as soon as somebody is a customer, and you can really leverage that not only for that particular customer, but also for your GDM strategy overall, right?
I can't praise enough your study, Peter. It's really great and it's really complete. And one thing that I'd like to iterate on it is I believe, as I saw a case of it on Monday, this Monday, that even in the first stages, so it's not only when you have a lot of clients, even the early stages, you can use this as the best leverage for your go-to-market strategy. Could you agree with that?
I think even in early stages, you can learn a lot from your early customers on even I think on your product strategy, but also for your GDM strategy. I think it helps a lot. I think usually companies, and I think especially startups, focus early on acquiring new customers, and often the existing customer base is neglected. And I think to some extent, it obviously doesn't hurt too much. But I think if as soon as you reach like a size where you kind of lose the overview of the customers that you have, because in the beginning, obviously, you have very close relationships probably with them. I think then it actually starts to hurt. And um, but I totally agree that I think it's very helpful to really establish a process on how you learn from your customers, um, because customer success or existing customers are often like treated just as a responsibility of customer success, but I think they are actually, I mean, as Stephen pointed out earlier, the biggest asset a company has, and I think they should be treated just like that.
Uh, I'm talking about this early stage because on Monday I just saw a really interesting case where a company just they had one solution and they pivot to a solution number two. But when and it wasn't working, and so this RevOps reference from the company look up for me and say, "Hey, could you just look a little bit of it?" And so when we start to seeing the data, the one thing that I noticed right away is they had only 25 clients. 20 of them use solution one. Three of the five that use solution two was already in their customer base. They only got two with the solution two, even though they choose to change their strategy to position themselves as a solution number two specialist. So when you see the data, it's kind of clear that maybe you could use a solution two as upsell, cross sell, or even you can use it as a second solution. But clearly, when you see the data, solution number one steals 4/5 of the company revenue, right? So I just like to share this because when it sometimes you think about like, oh, you have to have you have to be in a middle stage company to see the data, but even in that stage, it's clearly how the data will help you take better decisions strategically.
Yeah. I mean, I think
Of
in
course, Fernando. Sorry, Peter. Sorry.
no, sorry,
Go on.
please go ahead.
Okay. So, and one thing I really think it's fine. It's even without like a lot of data to work on it, you can have like a strong clue to what should I go now and go on to take a decision. So I think it's really important to follow the clues, especially when you don't have like enough data to be certain of some decision or something like that.
Yeah, and again, I think you can really, I mean, at that stage, you can easily talk to your customers and get an idea of what they're actually needing. I mean, if it's 25 customers, that's not too much of a hassle. But I think it highlights something that I mentioned before, and that's more these intuition-based decisions, right? So it means the intuition probably of maybe one of the founders that, oh yeah, this product too, that this is going to be the thing. And the data kind of contradicts it. And I think that's interesting. And oftentimes you see these kind of intuition-based decisions also in bigger companies. I mean, and if at some point a dedicated RevOps person or team is coming in, I think that then it usually starts to get more data-driven. And to change it, the later you try to change that, the harder it gets because of the resistance to change.
Exactly. Francisco, ready?
Ready, I'm ready. Just going to take the slides here.
So
One
before that, I'm
second.
gonna introduce yourself, of course. So last but not least, Francisco Arantes. He's a revenue operations leader working in Brazil since 2019. Currently serving as head of revenue intelligence at Alu. With a background in controllership and accounting science, he specializes in connecting data, strategy, and execution to drive sustainable revenue growth. Throughout his career, he has built forecasting models with high accuracy with volatile environments, structured revenue frameworks across acquisition and retention, and led teams focused on transforming data into executive level decisions. Francisco is also the author of Quando os Números Mentem, or in a direct translation, When the Numbers Lie, a book on analytical leadership and decision making in complex business environments. Chico, o show é seu, manda ver.
Perfect, Fernando. Are you already looking at my screen here?
Yes.
Okay, okay. So as Fernando said, I am a RevOps in Brazil since 2019. But I think like it's really interesting to talk with people who already are RevOps in USA and in Europe because in my point of view, Brazil is like some step uh, before what they already showed us here. It's really hard to explain people here in Brazil what are revenue operations should do although in the work. So if you say to someone here in Brazil, okay, I am a revenue operations, most companies will think, okay, he's the CRM guy, or he's the one who is going to do better dashboards or cleaner reports or a BA tool that actually works. So and not always looking from they start from the data and going to the insights. So that's interesting. I put this image here, and that's what I think RevOps should help the company to get to this stage. Because if you see here, I think it's a little bit small, but I can explain for you. Here in color red, we are going to talk about the top performance leaders, and here in the grays one, the everyone else. So always, if you the most part of the time, the top performance are leaders that make data-driven decisions very frequently. So that's really similar that Peter said and make decisions much faster than the market peers. So another good clue to follow this and execute decisions on intent most of the time. So here for me is where the revenue operations team should work to help the top performance from the company to can make more data-driven decisions, make it faster, and make this on intent. I'm going to talk about two projects I did in other companies in the end, but I think here is a good example to explain people uh, how should RevOps works. So we start on the data, and I think that's fine. But after that, you have to transform the data into information, and that's something. After transforming the information into knowledge, that's for me a good step. And to be really honest, I think most of the companies stops here in the part of the knowledge. And for me, the really powerful thing about the RevOps is to transform data into information, into knowledge, into insight. Because if you don't transform this into an insight, you are not going to change anything in the company, because you have to change the you have to transform this into something interesting for the C levels, for the directors, for the managers. Then they are going to see that. Of course, the revenue operations team will need the support from the data team, sometimes from the CRM team and everything. Sometimes here in Brazil, also the RevOps team manage the CRMs. In other places, maybe the marketings, but whatever, that's not a problem for us. But we should be really careful to, when data goes to insights, that's the main powerful thing here. When we talk about it, I have like two really good cases here in Brazil to explain people how should we transform data into insight. Uh, I worked at a company that did most of the sales by partners. So, okay, which partners refer the most and what do they have in common? And here is something that I always tells everyone that, okay, we have to take a look at the clues when we don't have like the full data and the full information to take the decisions. So first of all, we did find the pattern. So, okay, where are these partners? There is like one region in Brazil, like north, south, southwest, or anything here in Brazil to understand region. Okay, which tools does these partners use? And that's a really good thing, because when you talk with the partners, sometimes the insight is not in your information or in your CRM. Maybe you are going to understand that, okay, my best partner is the one who who have especially to understand how clients how their indications are going through the selling funnel or something like that. The size of the partners became really interesting. So, okay, my partners are already a big company or not, or sometimes the small ones are better or not. You are going to decide that. And the segment of the partners also make a lot of difference. So after that, you are going to segment them by behavior. So you are going to think something about, okay, I have these best partners, and how does them comport here in my base? So by tools, by size, by region, by segment, we are going to decide that. But I also have other people who and other partners who indicates less than the top ones, but behavior the same as them. So we decided to divide in three steps of a kind of VCP for the partners. First one, they behavior like a top performer in indication, and they are top performer indication. Second one, they just behavior like a top performer indication, but they does not indicate like them. And the last of them, people who don't behavior like a top one and who don't indicate the most as well. So we are like thinking about some steps to define and objectives for these partners who does not have the behavior before I force them to indicate more. I'm going to say to them, okay, just go from now I want you to have the behavior of the top performance. Then after the behavior of the top performance, I'm going to understand why you have the behavior of my top performance partners, but you are not indicating like them. So I'm going to have more contact with them, more calls, more mails, and these things to understand them more. And it really worked there. We had like amazing result with 3 times referrals with the same base, but better quality also. So more volume of leads, more quality of leads, and we are talking about like the same base becoming better and better and better in the behavior and in the number of the indications when we are talking about partners. Other a really good nice case, and we did outbound at Bleep when I worked there, and we already know, okay, we knew the company size, but we didn't know when. Like, I know what companies I want here in my sales funnel, but one thing that really changed when we look for the quality of the data was like, okay, but I need to know what and when, not just what, because the conversion drops a lot when we at it. So we did two kinds of movimentations there. First of all, what are the organic signals by this segment that I'm going to see in outbound? For example, schools here in Brazil, they start the year at January. So, okay, but in December, they're already like they're already having like the new students there. So it's not a good time to sell for them in December and January. But when did then raised their hand to talk with our sales team? Okay, it was at October. So schools are going to be in our outbound sales funnel. They are going to start at October. Then we are going to sell for them before December and January because they are not going to think about a SaaS in this time of the year. So other thing that we said that we look at of the data is okay, is a Black Friday, but is that a moment to do the outbound thing, or should we do the inbound thing here right now? So define the windows from segment to understand what's the right time to talk with these kind of the companies. That's something that changes a lot. The conversions increased it like almost 2 times when we did that in the outbound at league. So that was a really good uh, intelligence there. Something that I really defend here, and I want to see the opinion from Peter and from Stefan also, is that for me, revenue operations, we are talking about ask better questions, you not build better dashboards and other things. ICP logic applies to partners and not just for customers. I think Peter just bring for us a really good example of post sales analysis, and we can also do this for partners. Time is a variable, and in outbound it will count a lot. So you should look for the timing of your lead, even if he is already in your funnel, to understand when it's the best time to communicate them, what kind of communication we're going to do with them, in which stage also. So, okay, revenue is a system, and I think that's really similar as Stefan said in the the beginning, because like we should optimize the whole thing, and without strategy ownership, RevOps is just ops, not like intelligence in revenue. I think that's it. We can discuss a little bit about these takeaways, but I want to after that do another discussions that I have here in Brazil, because of this way people see revenue operations. Now I changed it from revenue operations to revenue intelligence while I'm building my team here, because it's easier to find some BAs to work as RevOps than really RevOps to work as a RevOps, because they are really good in CRMs or data extraction, but they are not good asking questions for the companies. But I think that's it, people.
Uh, Peter, are you going?
If you're not, then
Go ahead.
I'll take my chance. And so, thank you, Francisco. It was very interesting what you have been talking about. I think I had mostly like two questions. So specifically about this, I like the idea of this seasonality of outbound. I mean, seasonality you have like in most businesses, right? I mean, and especially if you have like in B2B SaaS, you sometimes have super long sales cycles. Some kind of seasonality is going to hit you, and understanding that, I think it's a very interesting. Um, so in your example, did you actually try to run some experiments on how to on when outbound is working better and when it's working worse, or did you just look at past data when you were like doing outbound like for the whole year, for example?
Yes, yes, was exactly like that. We just compared like this year over the last year in the same segments. Of course, like we try to understand budget and these things to equipare them, but we did this analysis to understand. Okay, we are going to go with an outbound with this strategy, or we are going to change it. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that makes a lot of sense. So I really love these two examples, and I think I had also a bunch of other questions. So if but maybe let me ask something else or comment on something else. So what you mentioned was like this distinction between like strategic and more tactical RevOps. I mean, I also talked about a couple of tasks a lot of RevOps professionals are doing, which is more like the data plumbing work or updating CRM fields and things like that. And um, so it seems that RevOps is so broad right now that, I mean, I think this aspiration is clear that it should be a strategic role, right? But in many cases, it's more like this doing the groundwork and being seen as a better CRM admin and building more dashboards, right? And I don't know. It's interesting to see how it's evolving. So you're talking about more going into revenue intelligence to distinguish from this more kind of tactical work, right?
Yes, yes, yes. And I think like one common thing that happens here in Brazil when people starts a revenue operations team, and I also talked this with Fernando the past weeks, is that people says, okay, I need some data to analyze, and I'm going to take this junior one to found the revenue operations team. And I think like that's the worst mistake ever, because revenue operations will probably work with managers, directors, C levels. And if you put like some junior guy to, okay, I will manage this data and I will try to convince the CEO that he should change the goals of the company, the CEO are going to say, okay, who are you? You just started here. But if you took like a senior guy from the market who already did some good projects, they are going to say, okay, maybe I should listen to you a little bit. We can find like the best goal for the company.
I could chime in on a few basic questions because it's a very loaded topic. If you have, are we out of time, Fernando? So I love this, and I'm just going to zero in on a couple things. One, to what degree did you or do you think it's possible to look at forward-looking signals from outside of CRM versus opportunity signals from within USN? CRM, obviously, it's difficult, but where do you see the potential to add behavioral consumption, some of the things that Peter was talking about, to make this forecast more reliable or provide greater intelligence for decision making? Do you have a point of view on that?
I think you should like use all the CRM data. And if after using all the CRM data, you have no clue how to improve, then you are going to see out of that. But sometimes when you talk like with sales managers and these things, they're going to say, oh, that's a good information. I could ask this on the onboard, and then I'm going to ask the marketing team to change the campaigns and these things after that. But first of all, I think the best way is to look at the CRM data if it's comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
and after that we are going to see out of it. But I think like for outbound, it's really good to look not just in the CRM but also out of these boxes, because outbound you have like more informations because it's a small amount of companies
Mm-hmm.
that you can try to search more. You can go at LinkedIn, you can call them, you can have like strong contact with them more than when you are going to say about the inbound with a thousand leads. I think it's harder to improve inbound with out of CRM data, but for outbound, I think it works better.
Yeah, so I almost want to connect the dots between what Peter and Francisco was saying. So Peter is saying, I know somebody in customer success, nothing surprises them if they missed the quarterly business review, if they didn't do the sales training, if adoption is low and they're not using the platform or consuming it right, it's pretty good chance they're not going to renew or recommend it to somebody else. So I love this notion of, wait a second, Peter was saying that will tell me, I mean, a good person, and I know this is expansion, but they missed the quarterly business review. They didn't even do the sales training. I can tell you with 99% certainty that this isn't going to go well for us. I love the notion of adding those signals on. And again, you're absolutely right. No one is mining CRM and the data they have as appropriately as they could. But Peter painted a roadmap to say, just like we don't use all of our brains, we're not using all of our data. So I think very, very difficult, but the combination of what you two are saying is very powerful.
Let me complement asking for exemplify this behavior that you just told about the change you implement at OMI. What was the behaviors of the top performer partners that make the referrals better and in more quantity? And how easily was to apply that behavior to the less better performance partners? I think uh, answer the first question would exemplify what Stephen just asked you.
Perfect, Fernando. We did, for example, people, there was like some accountabilities to that were our partners. So the accountabilities, which had more than 60 clients, used organization tool of the process of the accountabilities. And I think people who are from the São Paulo state, they were the best partners from us. So, but okay, the part of São Paulo, I cannot like uh, help the other partners to be, but I can help them and say, okay, you know, this accountability company, okay, they are already bigger than you, and they use this tool, and it works, and they already have like 60 clients. How can I help you to have more 60 clients, more than 60 clients? Can I indicate someone for you? I have like in my base of leads, should I indicate someone for you? I have like some accountabilities that are already closed, so I can bring you more clients. So I try to uh, educate the partner to go to the next level. And then we're going to say, okay, now you are ready to be my top performer guy in the indications things. So in this example, that were the insights that we had. But I think like that's infinite, you know. If you look and go on data, you're going to find more clues to of what are going to be the partners of them.
By the end of the day, so you are helping them, helping yourself by improving their organization method, and the information about that tool, the best one accountability uses. Uh, you couldn't find that in your CRM. You had to talk to get this information. So great, thank you for this amplification.
After that, Fernando, what we did was something like, okay, we don't have this in CRM. Now we already know this is important. Let's start getting this information on onboards and with like the customer success team or with the key account managers and these things. Like first feeling uh, outside the CRM after the that indicates really improvement in the results, then we are going to bring this into the CRM.
Stephen, Peter, do you have more questions for Francisco?
I have one, and it's a common question because I have so many. This is curious. I see so many structural issues with the analysis you're doing. For example, one common issue is they will conduct your analysis over a sales quarter because, to Peter's point, that's just the way we do things. Even in a situation where the sales cycle is 18 months. So I've seen so many organizations look at all of the uh, exogenous and the direct factors within a 3 month period, completely ignoring the fact that there are 12 months before that may have factored in. So they're almost only looking at a subset. For example, when a big deal comes in and it was an action that happened 12 months ago, if you're only looking at a 3 month window, it seems like it falls out of the sky and they just attribute it to luck or the weather or good fortune, when in fact it was some type of an action that you described. Do you see fatal flaws like that as being common? And how can people avoid that?
It's really right difficult to convince the managers that okay, your first touch will be probably the most important one. But if you look in the most analysis that happen, you can show them like, okay, if you look for the first, you look already in the first UTM when you are going to say about marketing. So why we shouldn't not look for the first touch and when was were the first touch? Try to convince them, Stefan, doing this comparing them In inbound, you already does this uh, because it's a short period of time. But in the outbound, you should do the same thing because probably the first touches and the first days of the lead in the funnel are the most important ones for them uh, become in fact a client. If you show them the comparison between okay, when a lead come for your SDR, you look for the metric what how long does you take to take contact with him. So and you say okay, if it's more than 5 minutes it's a problem. So okay, in outbound also, if you talk to them 5 months later it's a problem, and 5 months earlier it's also a problem. So try to do this comparing analysis between inbound and outbound helps a little bit, but it's still not like uh, a solution for to convince everybody to do this kind of analysis.
Stephen, I love your provocation. Your question was so smart and provocative. So I would like
I
to
stole it from somebody. Don't give me credit.
I'd like to give back this question to you. Have you seen a company that doesn't use a quarter method of measurement of the results of the company? Have you seen a different one?
Yeah, I think Francisco said, RevOps, is a phenomenon that maybe started in the SaaS industry in America, and people are at varying degrees of maturity. I, first of all, want to compliment you on this podcast because I teach at some of the top MBA programs in the world. But the number one way that RevOps professionals learn is by sharing information with each other. And the fact that you're creating this forum is doing a service to everybody. Second, Francisco, if I looked at, I've met with thousands of companies, and no one's very good at this. But I would say, if you think about maturity, most of the world is an 8-year old. But, there's a Pele out there. And the Peles of the world, because he's one of my favorite soccer players, would be doing certain things. One is multi-threaded data. Certainly, very few people are mining the data sets that Francisco said, but to Peter's point, um, treatments, customer engagement data, NLP, natural languaging processing, have been proven by Gong, people like Gong to be very indicative of forecast reliability. Now, relying only on those is kind of stupid too, but when you become a Pele or a Roberto Baggio, and you're a master soccer player, you start to weave those data sets in and tease it. So that's one. Second, trying to look at forward looking. So the big debate is forecast. Is it words matter? Forecast reliability or forecast accuracy? Forecast accuracy. I'll give you an accurate forecast, but I'm going to sandbag it. All I got to do is cut my number in half. Is it about hitting the forecast, or, to use Francisco's words, generating revenue intelligence that lets me be more reliable and make decisions? It really doesn't matter. Most companies miss their sales forecasts, which is fine. The world is an uncertain place. But trying to be more causal and understand these relationships, and to Peter's point, reallocate resources and do things differently to make it better. That's the real art. So many people are like, we missed our forecast and the stock market killed us. That's not the right mentality. It's Francisco's mentality, which is, I'm trying to build intelligence. And both Peter and Francisco are like, use the brain you have. Use CRM to its fullest extent. Once you use that, try to tap into some other brains. And Peter put them out there saying, oh, look at all these signals and this information. Certainly, we know the weather predicts revenues very well, but there's product telemetry data. Our products will tell us what is going on, the geolocation of our clients. So, yes, unfortunately, it takes a super high degree of sophistication, but Francisco's put the right questions out there, suggesting we start in the right place. And moving from forward looking from backward looking to forward looking is a big leap. But again, you've got to be very sophisticated. Um, anyhow, I think that's what I'd add. But I think we're all pointed in the right direction in this call.
Yeah, I mean, so maybe to also to add to what you just said, Stephen. So I mean, I think the thing is that also in RevOps, I mean, you don't have to get it perfect on the first try, right? So I think RevOps is like it's never done. It's about incremental improvements and understanding what are the levels of improvement. And as you said, I think judging it based on how far off from the perfect solution it might be, or from some goals it might be, is probably I don't know, the wrong yardstick to hold it against. But I think it's about these incremental improvements, and also understanding where could be the levers for this improvement. And maybe circling back on a point you made before, on what kind of data to use, and how to connect it with data outside the CRM. So I think this is just as you explained it. I think depending on the maturity of the organization or the RevOps team, it makes sense to rope in more information. But it has to be also a sensible choice, because from what I've seen, it's also like, especially I think in the pre-sales phase, if you rope in like everything and every kind of behavioral data source that you can find, looking on social, looking on inbound engagement, outbound engagement, I don't know, funding around hiring or whatever there is, it can be expensive to enrich all your leads with every data set that's out there. And in the end, you really have to find out what is in the end predictive of winning the deal, or retaining that customer long enough so it pays off. So it's really also a question of where to look, because I think today there are a lot of different data sources that you can tap on to incorporate into your data, and it's always a trade-off, right?
Hey guys, any more questions? If not, we'll close here.
Peter, are you writing a paper on that study?
So I plan to publish it. I'm not sure in which kind of format. Also like on the different topics that came up, on the pain points that came up, but also like on this topic of post sales data. I would love to publish something on that.
I'd happily collaborate or write a analysis on top of that to promote it. So both of you guys, the work you're doing is fantastic.
Awesome. So big thanks for that. I'm certainly coming back to that.
That's awesome, Stefan. Thank you.
Stephen, Peter, Francisco, I have no words to thank you guys enough. That was the inaugural and first episode of the podcast, and have people smarter you guys that you are guys, and you have no idea how much I learned with each one of you uh, here or even before that. So I can't praise enough of you guys, and to share the names of more people that are reference for us as well. I would like to ask you guys to name a reference for you. For instance, for me, Felipe Coelho, he's a partner at ABC here in Brazil. He's a guy who's teaching me sales, customer success, RevOps since maybe 2018, and I still learning from him. So I'd like to give him a praise about it. But I'm curious to ask you guys a name of one of your reference as well in RevOps community.
I've went to University of Chicago, and I work in a lot of MBA programs. There's a fellow named Dan Fraley. at the University of Chicago who's created a master's degree in chief revenue officer. It's a code word for RevOps. But I put the work that he's doing at the Vanguard, and we're developing some lectures with him. But I think he's doing a lot of good things to educate the world at University of Chicago. Dan Freely.
I really like Harry's Odoo Basic. I don't know if you know them, but he's a really smart one. And he works at Revenue Wizards. He's also author of the RevOps Pendulum, a really good book. And I really like him, what he says, how he teach the other people. So I think like that's my indication.
Yeah, actually, I also wanted to mention Harris, but there's another guy I think from Germany. He's called Janis Zech. Um, he's working at I think they do like things like activity capture and revenue intelligence at their company, and he's also publishing a lot of interesting stuff on RevOps, which I think I learned a lot from him about that.
Great. I will ask for you guys the names of each one, and I will put in the reference here at the YouTube section. Uh, Vitoreto said just brilliant, Francisco, but I can share this brilliantism to everyone in here. And thanks, guys. Thanks a lot, and we will keep in touch.